the world. Dear esteemed colleagues who have joined us from around the world, thank you all for joining us today as we embark on a journey for the launch of CGIAR's Climate Community of Practice. We are gathered here virtually at a very critical juncture in history. If you think about it, if you think about all the textbooks that we have grown up reading, agriculture started, settled farming started some 10,000 years ago. At the same time, now we know today that it has never been as hot, as warm as it is now, ever in these last 10,000 years ago. So what it means in essence is that our farmers are literally, from the beginning of farming, our farmers are now finding a world that is much hotter than they have experienced it ever before. So which means that this is an unprecedented change that is reshaping how we must approach food security, livelihoods, and sustainability. And the farmers for which the CGIAR, all of us work for, the farmers in the global south, those who are often least responsible for climate change, but are facing some of the most severe impacts. And as the world's largest publicly funded organization dedicated to agriculture, CGIAR, of course, is uniquely positioned to address these challenges. With our global network of experts and history of impactful research, CGIAR is a research in developing and implementing solutions to both mitigating and adapting to the effects of climate change. Our strength literally lies in our scientists and the collaborative efforts of nearly 600 scientists who are joining us today in this new community of practice. And this is what we are launching today. We are today celebrating all the scientists who are a part of this CGIAR community of practice. This is the second of the two sessions. The first session happened 9 a.m. this morning, where our Executive Managing Director, Dr. Ismahan Elaufi, was present and delivered the welcome remarks. Now, I would just quickly go through some of the housekeeping rules for all the participants. We are doing this in a meeting mode to ensure that there is maximum interaction. Given that when you are not speaking, keep your microphone muted and cameras off. For the panelists, please remain visible during the discussions and we would be spotlighting on you. Use the chat to introduce yourselves where you are joining from, which center are you from, while use the Q&A box for posting questions. So these simple steps will ensure that we will have a smooth and interactive experience. In the next 90 minutes, we will engage in these important discussions. The way it will go is I'll just take 5 minutes to set the scene, followed by Dr. Von Lucas Restrepo, the Director General of Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAD. He will deliver the welcome remarks. This will be followed by a short update from Emma Boa, who has recently joined as the manager of the platform. Then we'll have a panel discussion, which will be coordinated by Lorraine Ronke, and then we will highlight some brief tools of collaboration. So I would go back. So is my screen visible, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So very, very briefly, I wanted to set the scene. I've already said this is literally our mega challenge is how do we ensure food and nutrition security without breaching the climate boundary? Because this is kind of unprecedented kind of warming and climate change we have seen. And here the issue is to tackle climate change while not compromising food security. At the CG level, as we all know, our research and innovation strategy has 3 global targets around climate change. These are inspired by the climate SDG 13, 9, 11, and 12. And these are around mitigation, adaptation, and policy. So we are committed to delivering on these 3 global targets through all the work that we do across the various research initiatives and the bilaterals. Now, where does the climate platform fit in? The climate platform is one of the various mechanisms through which we deliver this. The role of the climate platform particularly is to bring together CGIAR's climate research. And we have 4 functions. All the platforms, we have 5 platforms, and 5 platforms have similar functions around convening, synthesizing, amplifying, for external profile and advising. Accordingly, the climate platform is organized across 4 modules. These are modules on expertise and themes, methods and metrics, synthesis, and influencing global processes. Today, we are largely talking about this module around expertise and themes, which is really the convening and the community of practice function. So far we have started. So I have just completed 1 year in this job, and we are fairly new in the system. So we have some of the things we have achieved is we now have a searchable database of 600 climate scientists across the CG. We have various a work plan, theory of change. We have been also working closely with all constituencies within the CG to help our strengthen our participation in COP. We have been engaged in evidence synthesis, and we have been also contributing to some of the global scientific assessments. So the ambition is around that the platform that we and the CG as a whole become that we through our work shape the global climate and food system agenda, given that food systems contribute to 1/3 of our emissions, but we do not anywhere nearly get that amount of funding, nor do we get that amount of significance in these international climate discussions. So as one of the largest publicly funded organizations in this space, we hope to shape the global discourse around this. So some of the things that the platform particularly does is around curation and synthesis. It provides the intellectual home for all our climate scientists and provides informing our climate portfolio. Some of the key moments that I'll briefly talk about, of course, today is a key moment for us, as will be the CGIAR Climate Mega Program. So we have some colleagues here who are in the writing team. I'll just shortly show who they are, and then some of our key moments would be around key convening. Some of the key resources that we have been sharing so far at the Climate Insights, which is a fortnightly roundup of all journal articles that are relevant to our space. Volume 6 went out this week. We also do blogs, evidence explainers, etc. And some of the key spaces where that collaboration happens are around D group space. My colleague will talk about it, monthly webinars, where we are actually looking at new areas of research and innovation. So we have been focusing on loss and damage. We would then focus on things around carbon credits, etc. These are some of the members of the Climate Mega Writing team. They span across all the centers, so please be in touch with whoever you are most well acquainted with and ask more about what's going into this mega program. We value those inputs that goes into this mega program because it's for all of us. So this is briefly how we go today. I will now welcome Von Lucas to deliver our the welcome address. And these are all our speakers. Apollinaire sent in regrets because he just got caught up in another meeting. And Guillaume, who is our deputy EMD, will join shortly, and he will deliver the closing remarks. So these are all our speakers, and I now invite Von Lucas to deliver welcome remarks. Over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Aditi, and welcome to colleagues and also partners. I'm very proud as the DG of the Alliance, but also the Global Director for Partnerships and Advocacy to help open this important launch of the Climate COP. And of course, you know that research around climate plays in the CGIAR mission to deliver science and innovation that advances transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. And it's great to see that this is the time we are coming together as a community of scientists across centers working on climate. So it's a good to be here. Also, the timing could not be better. As we all work towards more integrated and collaborative in CGIAR integrated partnership, these efforts are including the initiatives, the mega programs, bilateral endeavors from centers that are valued to our impact, and of course the impact area platforms. Together, they are making a set of consistent and complementary efforts to pull our diverse parts into one cohesive narrative on the most important development issue of our day. It's also great to know that we're building from past important efforts, and we got CGIAR examples from the past that includes our work in relation to climate smart agriculture or climate smart villages that were recognized as, one of the key innovations, collective innovations of CGIAR in its 50 years of life as a partnership, or climate information services and breeding efforts that are being combined with massive adoption of climate resilient varieties such as beans, maize, wheat, and other crops. And it's also today, looking at present, great to see how most centers and scientists are coming together to support ICRA or to inform, and I've been very close to these science to policy spaces such as the COPs Aditi mentioned. This is something very wonderful that I have seen and I have enjoyed as we see how our engagement around COPs, as an example, has been evolving and bringing us closer together. So 600 scientists is an important number that have self-identified as working on topics related to climate, that have this virtual space to meet, share, discuss, disseminate, that can only lead to new connections being made, new synergies being formed. This may also be the largest community of practice around climate scientists anywhere around, and this is an amazing resource for the CGIAR. It will be very important moving forward to define as best as possible how our scientists interact with the platform so that their roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities are clear, and also how the scientist part of this COP can bring the amazing network of other scientists and partners, especially from the Global South, and this will also be critical. In a similar manner, the platform that hosts this community of practice will be serving all of you, all of us, as a new space to collaborate and deliver. Science yields best results when we work collaboratively, and this community of practice is a rich resource for all of us at CGIAR, not only for our science, but also for our partnership and, very importantly, our advocacy. So in closing, while this launch primarily is intended, is internal and internally intended, I really welcome our partners, external speakers, funders that are joining us today from that community. For those external stakeholders, the Climate Platform will provide a very clear entry point into our amazing resource base that climate scientists and their great background and current achievements. The platform, therefore, and thanks Aditi for stating that, is ready to help them externally, out-facing, identify capacities from within our vast CGIAR system for partners, stakeholders, and audiences. So thanks a lot, and let's enjoy this conversation. Over from me.
Thank you, Juan Lucas. That was a very inspiring welcome, particularly, I think, how this rich body of scientists can work together closely, and also the rules of engagement. Hopefully, that will be something that we would co-develop over the coming few months and years that we work together, because impact areas are something quite central to our research and innovation strategy. Now, before we go to some of the fun facts about who this climate community of practice are, who these 600 scientists are, we have a Slido poll that I would request all of you to take. So if I can have the Slido up on the screen, please, Vanessa. Either you can scan the Slido in that QR code, or join at slido.com. Code is 2068835. So our first question is, yes, and I have a feeling that two of you present today would be very happy with some of these answers. And I'm not saying which two right now, but which two centers have the highest number of scientists who work on climate change? So please have your answers coming in. ABC is Alliance of Biodiversity and CEAT, just in case you are wondering what is ABC. Yes, a few more. Okay, we are waiting for a few more names. Okay, keep typing. I think I have spotted the correct answer, which Emma will unveil shortly. Our second question, if you can go to the second question, I believe the poll remains open, so you keep putting in. In which two countries are our greatest numbers of scientists who work on climate change based? So where most of our climate scientists based, in which country? Okay, Kenya, Colombia, India. Kenya and India, okay. Excellent, India, Colombia. So we are getting Kenya and Colombia, okay. Excellent. I think most of us kind of know the correct answers, more or less. If we now can move to the third question. Again, perhaps this is really easy. I feel like a teacher who has set really, really easy questions is which climate hazard have CGIAR scientists produced the most research results in the last 1 decade? And I won't tell you how much we have produced in the last 1 decade. Okay. I think we have any more hazard. This can't be that we just work on drought, right? We work on more things. Wonderful. Okay. So keep answering, keep typing. In interest of time and to give adequate time to our panelists, what I will now do is I will now invite my colleague Emma Boa, who has recently joined from this month as a manager of the climate platform, but she also continues in a role with our innovative finance and resource mobilization and partnerships and advocacy. So Emma would be presenting some of the facts about our community of practice and some of the high-level synthesis of the climate work that the CG has done in the past decade or so. And also that will answer some of the questions that we had posed earlier. Over to you, Emma.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Aditi. So I'll speak about three exercises that the platform has undertaken. One is a survey with the scientists in the community of practice. And then another one is a review of some of the information in the PRMS. And then also looking at the publications that have been produced in the last 10 years. Okay. So in terms of who are in the climate community of practice, so there's a survey that was shared across CGIAR, and any researchers who self-identified as working on any aspect of climate change qualified to fill in the survey. And so far we have about 600 people who have filled in the survey, and those are the people who are forming the current community of practice. And we have an email list and a Teams channel that we'll be using for exchange and communication. But we also know that there are many more scientists within CGIAR. So we'd be very happy to have more people filling in the survey so that we can understand a little bit more about the scientists that are working on climate change. So Susie is going to put the link to the survey in the chat, and you can share it with colleagues in case you know people who would be interested but have not already filled in the survey. So in terms of the distribution of the scientists across the centers, I think as many of you rightly typed in the Slido, the Alliance had the most people filling in the survey, followed by CIMIT, and you can also see how the other centers are faring. And I think this, I'm sure that if we were to ask, a lot of you would say that there are many more scientists, so it would be good if you can share the survey link with them and you can have more people signing up. And then in terms of where the scientists are located, so India, Kenya, and Colombia were the top, followed by the rest of the countries. And I think this was also reflected in the responses that we saw on Slido. And then apart from where they are located, there was also a question about in which regions they work or they have expertise. And you can see the distribution across the different regions. So most of the researchers who filled in the survey actually indicated that they work at the global level, and then followed by Africa and Asia. But we also know that some of the ones who mentioned that they work at the global level also work in Africa or Asia or other parts as well. Just to mention that the numbers here would overlap. And then in terms of the aspects of climate change, a majority of the scientists work on impact, adaptation, and vulnerability, followed by mitigation, physical aspects of climate change, climate finance, and then a few other more specific aspects of climate change as well. And then this shows how the scientists are distributed in the different initiatives. So the blue circles represent the initiatives and the pinkish purplish circles represent the scientists. So then here we are able to see which initiatives have some high numbers of scientists working in them, and then others with fewer. But we also see that there are quite a number that have lots of scientists working in them. So we have Climber, we have Mitigate Plus, we have Nexus Gains, we have Excellence in Agronomy, and others. And then the other interesting thing is that it also shows how many initiatives the scientists are working in. So you can find that somebody, for example, this one works with Climber, but also with Foresight. And then you can trace if they are involved in other initiatives as well, which I think is a good thing to show the interconnectedness and collaboration and some of the coordination that's happening amongst the initiatives. And then in terms of the review of the 2022 PRMS and the publications, the journal articles since 2013, so out of the publications that have been done since 2013, 3,800 have climate change, the word climate change in the title or as keywords. And this covered all centers except ICRAF. And then in terms of PRMS, just looking at how strongly climate is represented in the publication, we have over 212 which had climate as being principal. So I think that's a good thing to show the extent to which climate change is reflected in the publications. And then from the review of the 3,800 journal articles, some word clouds were generated. So just to understand what are some of the keywords that are coming in. So here in terms of the themes, the major themes. So of course, climate is a major one, but also food security. And then when thinking about climate change, we see that we have both adaptation and mitigation. But also some sectors, some specific sectors that come up a lot. So water, irrigation, soil, forests, crops, livestock, and others as well. And then in terms of the climate hazards, I think this one also in the slide showed that drought is the hazard that has been published on the most. But then we also see what the other hazards are in the word cloud there. Then in terms of so while looking at the publications, into the 2022 publications, the peer-reviewed publications in PRMS. There was a categorization of the publications, and we see that about 135 focused on methods, and then we had others focusing on impacts and also on solutions. So we have some a good number on solutions as well, which I think is good, that we are also solution oriented. And then in terms of looking at current and future impacts, so the ones that have been reflected a lot in the publications are food systems, crops, livestock, and fish, and then natural systems, human systems, including gender aspects, as well as climate security, including migration as well. And you can see the numbers reflected there. Then also in terms of the climate solutions, I think we have a very high number focusing on adaptation. And this is on climate information services, climate smart agriculture, agronomy, irrigation, and others. And then we also have quite a number focusing on breeding for resilience. So looking at resilient breeds, and both for livestock and for crops. And then we also have some that have a focus, the solutions have a focus on mitigation, but with adaptation co-benefits, and also the enabling environments of policies and institutions, as well as finance. And these would be some of the areas that the climate community of practice will be looking at. So in terms of synthesizing the evidence and the science that's within CGIAR. And so we are hoping that you'd feel encouraged to join in and help to co-create this, but also let us know if there's anybody who should be in the community of practice but has not filled in the survey or has not joined yet, so that we can reach out to them. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Aditi. Thanks.
Thank you, Emma. And so please get in touch with us. We also have a generic climate email address, climate@cgir.org. So feel free to be in touch and we'd be happy to take and answer questions. Now now that you have, all of us have a bit of a background of who our scientists are and what kind of work that the CG does in this space, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Lorraine Ronke. She is on secondment from the World Bank, and she's been a senior policy advisor at IFPRI, and she and I work closely as a part of our climate platform. So over to you, Lorraine, for you to introduce the panelists and take the panel discussion forward. So
Okay.
a request. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Aditi. Thank you for inviting me also to chair this panel discussion where we really want to get at how this community of practice could be best used, both within the CG and externally. So accordingly, we have panelists from within the CG and from amongst our external partners. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining. I think we should start with Bram Govaerts, who, as you know, is Director General of CIMMYT. Welcome, Bram, and thank you for coming. I think we're all interested to hear, what are your expectations of the community of practice in this important area of climate and climate impact and climate change? You know, what are some of the opportunities for engagement between the community of practice and the centers? You're on mute.
Thanks, Lorraine, and amazing, right? We still do that, stay on mute. So thanks for inviting me, and also congratulations to Aditi for great work. And if you ask me, my first reaction is, what can this community of practice do? It is the next step in a continuum, right? We have been talking about climate change, we have been talking about agriculture, but it's only in the recent 2 COPs that it really got a formal place in the COP conversations. So there's still a lot of work to do for the agricultural community. And I also think there's still a lot of work to do for the CGIAR and the center community. And we all know the context, right? 12 months of global temperatures that have been above pre-industrial levels, 1.58 degrees Celsius is the latest data. I have. Adopting food and crop systems to the rising temperatures will be a key element, but also, of course, mitigating the global greenhouse gas emissions as agriculture contributes 24%. And I do want to recognize that Aditi has done a very inclusive job of bringing scientists from across the CGIAR together. And of course, the CG has climate champions everywhere, visible thanks to some of the CCAF's efforts and the initiatives on climate change. There's great leaders in the CGIAR that have been championing the flag for the whole community. I mean, I think of Ana Maria, I think of many other leaders in the system, of course, Tech and Simet. And I think the platform here is giving life to one of the impact areas where we do still need to work on that visibility, because in a way we have had climate change activities a bit at the side. And I think the opportunity of the community of practice is to show everybody how their work is actually strategically contributing to climate change. Because we have kind of two elements. We have one where we're very explicit, this is climate change work, but we have actually more than that. The CGIAR strategy and the CIMIT strategies in that, for that matter, streamline climate change throughout its objectives. And sometimes I think it's always a bit of a challenge, right? Do you put it forward as a separate thing so it gets its own attention, or do you streamline it through? But then people may be wondering, are we losing the strength of it? So I think this community of practice is the response to that dilemma. There is a mega program on climate change, but there's also a need to help scientists to translate what they already do towards that climate agenda, to make it more visible, to make it clear, the high-performing germplasm and the applied crop improvement for climate resilience, our sustainable intensification pathways, our foresight and modeling, our real-time weather and agriculture advisories, our climate change groups or tables, as we call it, our capacity building for climate resilience, our pro-poor finance and investments that's actually climate finance and investment. So how do we bring that all together? And last but not least, I see the platform, Aditi, and the community of practice to be a tool to stay honest. We don't want to just shout climate change. We do this, we do that. 90% of our work is climate change. I think we need to be more ambitious than that. If we really want to respond to carbon neutral agriculture, if we really want to respond to adaptation to climate change, we need to push the boundaries. Business as usual will not do it. So the design of that non-business as usual, what are the centerpieces of such a non-business as usual strategy, while we present what we have, while we present what we already do, what is that disruption, where it's going to come from? I really expect this community of practice to push that forward, but also to keep us honest. When we make statements, when we measure the impact, are we really moving the needle? Are we really generating those deltas that I call it, that change towards a trajectory that by doing nothing would be a negative one on adaptation and on climate mitigation. So I really hope with this whole community, we can take the next step from data to information, from information to decision making, and from decision making to decision taking, and inject that process in the global conversations where I think we're still not yet sufficiently there, but also not yet sufficiently at the service of those decision makers throughout. And with a decision maker, I mean the farmer. She needs to decide which technologies to apply, all the way to a community leader up to the UN Security Council, where decisions on climate and national international security are taken. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Bram. So I'm hearing you say the community of practice is like a next step of all the efforts that we've been ramping up on the topic of climate, and also serving as sort of giving life and visibility to the practitioners, you know, in all their varied activities across the CG. And actually on the point of pushing the boundaries as a community and bringing that into sort of decision-making, decision-taking space is a perfect segue to our next panelist, who is comes to us externally from the World Bank. I'd like to introduce you to Stefan Hallegatt, who's a senior climate change advisor, possibly the most senior climate change advisor at the World Bank. Thank you so much for joining us. Stefan, what excites you about this first-time assembly of 600 plus climate scientists at the CGIAR?
So thank you so much. And for full disclosure, I think I'm invited because when Lauren told me about the community of practice, I looked so happy that she felt I could say a few words here. And I was really happy because I've been in my role at the World Bank overseeing the country climate and development reports, this new diagnostics we're doing in all countries, where we look at countries' development goals and how to achieve those goals in spite of climate change. So both the mitigation agenda and how to do low carbon development, but also how to cope with all of the impacts of climate change, especially in countries that are most vulnerable to it. And I think agriculture has been a big part of those CCDRs, but there is the feeling that we have to do much better in capturing the vulnerability and the opportunities in agriculture in our reports. And so what I wanted to do today is just flag like 3-4 things where I think we need your help. One is that I used to read everything about climate change. Now it's just impossible for a team of 100, right? So I think distilling what we know into something that we can use is really as important now as creating new knowledge. So if this team can really help distill what we know and what we don't know and make sure we have this balance, Bram was talking about being honest, also being honest about what we don't know and what to do about it, I think it's really important for us. A second challenge we have been meeting is agriculture is so granular. It's completely different in each place of the world. And even in one place of the world, it tends to be multiple crops, multiple seasons, multiple everything. And so we're kind of like stuck between the need to be very granular and precise to look at the details. And at the same time, if you want to move the needle, you need these big messages, right? You need to excite people about what can be done in making agriculture more resilient and lower carbon, and also better at just feeding people and creating incomes. And I think sometimes we're stuck in like shallow messages and nobody's really interested, or we just go the rabbit hole in one thing and then we're kind of like losing our audience too. And so I think we really need to use this group of people to try to understand how we best communicate those messages that people feel, yes, I can do something about this. I can improve people's life in this sector. And finally, I think we have a lot of evidence about the what should be done. And we often have these statements that we have like triple and quadruple wins and the potential is huge. I think when you get into the how, and especially the political economy challenges, the challenges to change behaviors that are sometimes connected to cultural habits and the status quo is always a very robust thing. I think we need much more about how to make changes and give decision makers what is the next thing that you will do on Monday morning to change. And very often we have those long-term projections, this big potential. Translating that into small steps that people feel are feasible is really something where, again, we need your help. So we hope that this group can really help us, provide us with what we're missing. And I want to finish on one thing is, when people talk about hard to abate sectors in the decarbonization process, they will think about cement, they will think about steel. Frankly, I mean, when I'm trying to get countries on track to a net zero target, agriculture very often is where I'm ending like scratching my head, right? Because it's really, really hard. And so I think if you could also like mobilize at the highest level, not Minister of Agriculture, but higher than that, that this is a key part of the decarbonization process and not only a resilience question. I think that would also be something really useful. So I'll stop here, but we expect a lot from you, and I'm sure you will deliver even more than we expect. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Stefan. So you've heard it here, people. Cry for help from the World Bank on collating, curating, making digestible all the good work that's being done, huge volumes of work. The community of practice to help curate and collate messages based on the more detailed work that all of you are doing, these 600 plus scientists, and a discussion space. I think I heard you say, Stefan, on how to help us mobilize this dialogue at the highest level as well, because, you know, the evidence basis is really what we want to build on. I want to turn next to another one of our partners. Allow me to introduce Nikita Erickson-Hamel, who is Deputy Director of Policy and Practice at the Agriculture and Food Systems Division of Global Issues and Development Branch, Canada. So, Nikita, Canadian to Canadian, from the perspective of Global Affairs Canada, what expectations would you have of a group like this?
Yes, good afternoon, and I hope you can all hear me. Firstly, thank you for this invitation. I'm very pleased and always appreciate being invited to come and engage with CGIAR. Your question about what our expectations of this community practice, I think, is challenging to answer, not fully knowing, how you're developing this or being on the inside. So, I'll use my perspective as a donor, but also as someone who's been following the CGIAR's evolution for the past 15 years. And also from my perspective, sitting on the Strategic Impact and Monitoring Evaluation Committee, the CIMIC Committee of CGIAR, and perhaps lay down a few markers for your consideration. Now, when thinking about what would be expectations from this community of practice and the products of your research, and I had to reflect on what to compare to. And what came to mind is what I think has been one of CGIAR's most important research contributions of the past 20 years. And that is the Climate Change, Agriculture, and Food Security program, the CCAFS program of the last decade, was perhaps one of the most successful initiatives, in part for its quality of research products that you all were all part of, but also for its success in bringing together a group of scientists from across the system, eager to work, to collaborate, advance, and eager to build this new body of knowledge on climate-smart agriculture. And I think it was one of those first programs to work beyond and across commodities and centers. And as a result of the over 10 years of effort, hundreds of scientists, all of you working together on CCAFS, could confidently claim to have created this kind of new transdisciplinary field of knowledge on climate-smart agriculture. And I think, at its prime, this research program was disseminating, many high-quality research products, from analytical tools, policy positions, investment plans, climate services, to thousands of beneficiaries around the world. And many of these were touched upon, I think, in the word cloud that we saw Emma present. And many of these remain relevant today, and we still want to see these continuing to advance. And today, the CGIAR remains a science leader on this topic. And you asked what my expectations are, and I think going forwards, we expect it to remain one, if not the most influential knowledge broker at the science practitioner interface for climate and agriculture. And now, much has changed since we created CCAFS in 2010, and the architecture of agri-food looks very different. It's evolved. It continues to be very diverse and fragmented. And there's many more organizations now with a lead and a title for climate and ag, who are also contributing and defining bodies of knowledge in this space. And I think what I would expect from this community practice is to keep that leadership alive, and to keep alive the great CGIAR research of the past on climate-smart agriculture, but also provide that leadership to further strengthen, improve, and really scale up this important body of knowledge and reflect it within the new policy narratives that we're seeing. And I think, we have high hopes that all this will be injected into this new One CGIAR mega program that we heard Aditi speak to in the introduction. And I think, as success 5-10 years from now, this community of practice, all of you, will want to look back and see how the broad development community recognizes you for sustaining and enriching the body of knowledge on climate-smart agriculture and showing the world how agriculture and agri-food solutions can contribute to this climate change crisis. So we'd be happy to come back in a few years and give you impressions of from a donor perspective on your work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure they'd be willing to hear from you even before that. I want to thank you for that emphasis on the transdisciplinary value of the community of practice. When Stefan was saying that the body of work just keeps growing and growing, and so the community of practice in similar is sort of like that historical community you're referring to, just like growing. It's on steroids in terms of going across the 15 centers and the 600, and I think your focus or flagging that the benefit of the transdisciplinarity, not just adding up like the different centers, but what it means, for the CG narrative around climate and what it can contribute. I think that was a very interesting and useful comment. And I actually have the same question for our next panelist, Dr. Sarah Schmitz of GIZ. I mean, Germany has long supported the CG, including on scaling science, like the science of scaling and innovation. What role do you see for the community of practice in moving a scaling agenda on climate research forward?
Yeah. Hello. So first of all, thank you for inviting me or for inviting Germany. I'm just here because BMZ unfortunately was not able to participate. So the Ministry for International Agricultural Cooperation and Collaboration. And we're Germany has been a supporter of the CGIAR for 50 years now. So we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year of being a donor to the CGIAR. And we very much welcome this community of practice. I will echo a few of my of the former speakers, because where we see a main role for the climate community of practice is on the one hand on pointers where like climate smart innovations that we should scale, but also the CGIAR is doing so much excellent research, and we have seen that hundreds of publications on climate change. And for policymakers, it's incredibly difficult to filter through all this information on climate change, its impact on agriculture, on food security, on mitigation, adaptation, on the innovations that emerge out of the CGIAR research. So we see a major role for the community of practice at this forefront of the science policy interface. So similar to the World Bank's expectations, we hope that the community of practice can really help us to distill what we know into something that we can use. So to really use it for policies that we are making, for having the data to back current policies, to identify gaps that might exist, and also, if necessary, to adapt our policies. So that's a major role that we see for the community of practice, to have this information in a very accessible way, both the data, the research, the innovations, foresight modeling, but also concrete policy recommendations. And you might know that Germany is also supporting the first CGIAR flagship report that will be launched at the end of this year. So that's a very similar idea, to provide policymakers with the information, the innovations, and the concrete policy recommendations on what to do. So we really welcome the efforts of the community to do that, and to provide a low entry point into this incredible wealth on climate change data. So yeah, we look forward very much to the community of practice, to working with the community of practice, and I'm very happy that I could join the launch of this today.
Well, we're very happy you could join as well. I mean, both you and Nikita touched on this sort of global thought leadership. You were just speaking about the flagship, et cetera, and what the role of the community can be in sort of making sure that that is really the sum and the total of what the CG has to offer on this important agenda. And also echoing sort of what Stefan was saying about, it's not just on the innovations that we should scale, but how we go about doing that. And Germany has been a strong supporter actually in that line of work, and that scaling line of work that the CG has been doing. But also I wanted to touch on your last point before turning to our last external speaker, Bill Sutton from the World Bank, because Bill also leads a community of practice at the CG. We're operational people. If I switch hats for a moment and go to the bank, your point about an entry point, Sarah, that the community of practice, as it assembles so many centers and so many scientists, it makes it less unwieldy, so more wieldy, if you will, for partners to access. And I think that was a great point. And And Bill, I want to turn to you now on that point because you similarly lead a community of practice. So for those of you who don't know, Bill Sutton is the global lead for climate smart agriculture at the World Bank, and he's Aditi's direct counterpart. So I was really pleased, Bill, that you could join us, and I was wondering if you could share with the colleagues, what opportunities for collaboration do you see between the climate community of practice being launched today at the CG and the World Bank community of practice on climate smart agriculture, which is known as a global solutions group? Bill, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lorraine, and thanks to Aditi and all of the CGIAR colleagues for the opportunity to be with you today for this exciting launch event of your own community of practice on climate change. Believe it or not, as Lorraine mentioned, we just launched our own community of practice, what we call Global Solutions Group, on climate smart agriculture at the World Bank at the end of February. And we kickstarted our own launch with participation from CGIAR, both Aditi and Lorraine. We now have over 130 members from across the World Bank, which, given that we have a far fewer number of staff working on agriculture, I think is not too bad for a start. And in fact, we're collaborating with CGIAR and Lorraine on our first series, which we're calling the Ask a Scientist series. We held the first event just last week with a group of CGIAR scientists on how to reduce livestock emissions while enhancing productivity, which is a really critical question for us. It was, I think, quite successful. We had most of the time was devoted to Q&A, which I think is really important, so that we have a kind of two-way communications avenue. There were lots of questions from World Bank staff, practical questions on how to address livestock emissions in our investment operations while at the same time improving productivity. We had a lot of informative responses from the CGIAR scientists. Of course, I think we all know that there's no easy answers to this question right now, but it's great that we started asking the questions and having this dialogue. There's clearly a lot of hunger out there for this information, both from our staff and from our client countries. And indeed, we're about to launch just next month the World Bank's first global flagship report on climate change mitigation in the agri-food system. It's called Recipe for a Livable Planet, Achieving Net Zero Emissions in the Agri-Food System. And in the report, we underscore the importance of the agri-food system contribution to the climate crisis. And we also identify the needs for improving the enabling environment for the agri-food system transformation to net zero. And we've organized those actions around 6 themes or I's. And I think that the CGIAR can play a critical role in several of those I's. The first is innovation. So we need viable, innovative mitigation technologies that can contribute to emissions reduction while also improving productivity and increasing resilience in the agri-food system. I think it's fair to say that we're probably about maybe 10 to 15 years behind the transport sector and at least 20 years behind the energy sector. As our Vice President Jürgen Vogele sometimes says, there's no equivalent of the electric car in agriculture, at least not yet. So we still have a lot of work to do on the innovation front. That's clearly your forte. In addition, a second I, information. So improving the MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions is a critical challenge for us. It's complex, it's often inaccurate and expensive. So we need to improve how MRV is done in the agri-food system in order to help farmers access carbon markets, assess emissions reduction progress, and also track project performance, among other things. And third, incentives. As an economist, I can't forget about incentives. There's currently a real lack of national policy coherence across sectors and within the agri-food sector, which also is inhibiting the implementation and scaling up of climate smart agriculture. So improving that policy coherence and repurposing harmful subsidies toward agri-food system mitigation could deliver both emissions reductions and many other benefits. So you know, your colleagues at IFPRI and other centers around the world, I think, you know, we've already been working together quite effectively on the repurposing agenda. And I think there's obviously still a lot of work to do on that agenda. CGIAR scientists can be, I think, extremely helpful with all of these areas: innovation, information, and incentives. But at the same time, it shouldn't be a one-way street. We need to work together. I think World Bank can also help you in putting your ideas into practice, getting them into the hands of farmers and into the minds of policymakers around the world, scaling innovations to potentially reach millions of farmers through our investments. So in addition to our Ask a Scientist series, maybe we can think about something like an Ask a Banker series as well, where you know, we can help you learn more about the priorities of World Bank staff and client countries around the world. So the short answer to the question is we've already begun working together between the CGIAR and World Bank climate COPs. And there's certainly a lot more we can do together. This is just the beginning, and we look forward to having our two communities of practice collaborate closely going forward. Thank you.
That's great, Bill. Thank you so much. I think you're right to emphasize that kind of two-way street, because that already started happening in the Ask a Scientist. It wasn't just that the scientists were bombarded with all sorts of questions about what was presented, but the nature of the questions communicated back to the scientists the kind of things that are preoccupying the minds of the scalers. Yeah, and we're also really looking forward to the joint activities of the two communities of practice. And I think now we should turn it back internally to round up the panel session. And by turning to two scientists who have kindly agreed to serve on the panel, and then we'll turn to all the rest of the scientists in the Q&A session. So maybe I will turn first to Anthony Whitbread from ILRI to maybe share some of your perspectives on the expectations from this community of practice. Over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Great conversation. Well, I guess the expectations that I have would be very much around what a community of practice usually tries to achieve, and that's helping bring together the breadth of CGIAR climate work across the whole number of centers. I'd like to see scientists learning new topics outside their area of expertise. I'd like it to help us build collegiate relationships that lead to collaboration. And I'd like us as scientists to become much more aware of the global processes, particularly the COPs and the IPCCs that are around. So things like sharing data, tools, methodologies across geographies, sharing stories of success, of impact, highlighting the possibilities for sharing that data, linking it to the metrics, the inventories, the MRV, that sort of data that's suitable for these geographies we're working in, the least developed countries. I'd like to see it amplify the work within the CG and outside the CG. And I'd like to see that the community of practice brings adaptation and mitigation much more together, because we have been often separate on those two topics. And you can see from the diagram before that adaptation was much stronger in our history. So yeah, hopefully the COP can bring this engagement, provide that leadership to move us into new areas, new science areas, help highlight the very high quality science that is done amongst the CG scientists. And I think linking back to what some of the panel members were saying, help synthesize and distill that information for accessibility, particularly to the policymakers. Thanks.
That's great, because it's quite concrete, you know, how to build collegial relationships, how to become aware of other research and keeping the colleagues plugged into the global initiatives going on and where new science areas may be emerging, and as well as the sharing of data and resources. So those are really tangible, Aditi, if you're taking notes. So I'm going to turn now to our last panelist, Claudia Ringler from IFPRI. And Claudia, if you can do it in 3 minutes, you will preserve my track record for being a timely moderator. So over to you. Your question is, how do you see the community of practice informing or engaging with the mega program M1 on climate change? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. I think the climate impact platform should push us to think outside the box, because as we have heard from William and Stefan, agriculture is this big mass that's not moving and has lots of negative feedback effects. Every time there's a drought, lots of bad policy action will happen, and we're rapidly worsening climate change and food insecurity. So make us think outside the box, push us from the impact platform to the research program and back and forth. So I think we need to throw that ball back and forth. I think the second one is there's a lot of research going on. I think that has been demonstrated, but we need to better channel that research to meet global targets, to actually inform global targets and to start to achieve global targets, and to actually really get these agriculture negotiations happening, right? They break down every time we have global meetings. And so, yeah, and I think only the impact platform can make that channeling happen, because 600 scientists individually trying to do it is not going to do it. So we definitely have to communicate together. And then 600 scientists. So obviously some will be in this mega program or whatever we'll call it on climate action, but every other program, the livestock program, the regenerative agriculture program, the agro-ecosystem work, the agronomy work, the genetic gains work. So all of that, they will also link in one way or another to climate change. So convening across all of us, I think that is maybe the biggest job. And finally, capacity sharing, I think, is an area where I hope the climate impact platform can do a great job, or needs to do a great job. And that's not just internal. I think we need to work with the national ag systems. They're defunded at a very rapid rate. I mean, there's not much happening because there's no resources, there are no capacities, completely undercapacitated. So I think, this is a big job of CGIAR that very few or no one else can actually do. And, I'd say at this point we have failed, because you can look at how these systems are degrading. So I hope we can do something in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. So pushing us to think outside the box, helping to better challenge research sort of agendas and where the priorities are, and informing negotiations. And this point you're making about having a sort of more powerful consolidated voice that will require, a function of convening across the relevant mega programs, as well as having convened across all these scientists. And Aditi, with that, you have heard 35 minutes of input from external and internal panelists, all of whom I thank very much for your time and for your insights. That's my alarm. I am just so anal, I know. All right, over to you, Aditi. Bye.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing your very important insights. I think this was inspirational. We have noted down of many of the asks, and we hope to deliver as many as possible. We would, of course, have to prioritize. For example, the ask around capacity sharing. I think some of the things that we have in the plans are around evidence synthesis. I was involved in the IPCC in the last cycle, and just the sheer amount of volume of work that comes in, that within the IPCC, people are now talking that no scientist can actually synthesize all that. We might actually need to have AI help us assess those kind of. So that's literally the volume of literature we are getting. So a big part of our work will be on synthesis, and part of the capacity sharing we do want to do is around training our scientists on how to do rigorous synthesis and evidence mapping and systematic review. So stay tuned for some of those opportunities. And also similarly for the NARS, let's keep this discussion open. But thank you so much to all the panelists. Excellent feedback, and we would take those on board as we move forward. Now we have another Slido poll coming up. Now we have heard just such a rich canvas of ideas of how exactly we can collaborate together. So now we would like to go back to our community of practice, our scientists, everybody who has joined us today, if we can have the Slido poll up, Vanessa, please. So here we have a question on, can you give us, after hearing from all the speakers and the panelists, tell us your ideas for some concrete activities that this COP can do together in 2024 and beyond. We heard about capacity sharing. We heard about evidence synthesis. If there are, other ideas, please put it in. You can either scan this QR code, or you can join on slido.com, and the code is 2068835. We have build managerial capacity among CGIAR scientists, scaling up best practices. And feel free to write a bit more about what do you mean by managerial capacity. Raise funding, evidence synthesis, sharing success stories, point of contact for externals. That is indeed what we keep hearing, that the platform actually provides a good conduit to do that matchmaking. In the morning session, we had shown actually this database of scientists that we have, that is an internal searchable database. I have not shown it in this session, but we do have that database where we can, for example, if somebody wants to know who among our community works in Morocco, we would be able to give you the names of the people who work in Morocco on XYZ, for example. Science policy interface, impact evaluation. So this is absolutely great. Methodologies, we do have a module around methods and metrics that we hope to do more this year. Organize better on COP members, work on advocacy. All absolutely excellent suggestions. So with this, please keep your ideas coming, because we would be taking this on as we finalize our plans for 2024 and beyond. Some of the activities we do are around webinars. We do activities around, we actually do a fortnightly roundup of all the publications on climate change and agri-food system. And we bring it to you by the title of Climate Insights. So you kind of know what's been published in this place. That's an easy way to know. But we have plans for podcast and a few more knowledge sharing activities. So this is, thank you, Susie, for sharing the Climate Insights. We have now 6 volumes of those. Review use of past tools by CGIAR. That's great. One of our modules is called Methods and Metrics. And this year we hope to actually start the process of curation of those methods and metrics, because very often we have fantastic tools that then gets not used after the project closes, and we need to really do a better job with that. So with that, I wanted to now pass on to my colleague, keep your answers coming, to Gina, who is leading our comms activity, and Gina will walk us through some of the internal mechanisms through which our scientists can come together and work together. In particular, she'll talk about D groups. All of you would receive an email to become a member of the D groups early next week. And she will also walk us through our internal SharePoint. Over to you, Gina.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Aditi. Yeah, I would say as the lead communicator for the climate platform, I'm really, really very excited about the conversations that we are having, and that, as a committee of practice, there's a huge appetite for improved collaboration, knowledge sharing, and capacity building, right? We understand the wide range of opportunities that the committee of practice holds for us, and that's why we are continually adopting tools and platforms that will encourage collaboration at the community level. And this is why we are bringing D Groups today. So D Groups is an online platform that is a fantastic way to manage, grow, and improve collaboration within the committee of
Sorry,
practice.
Gina, can you share? Can you do this in a slide share mode, please?
Oh, so sorry, so sorry, so sorry. Okay, okay, yes. And yeah, so within the groups, users will have the opportunity to quickly, to have quick real-time conversations, chats, create conversation boards and threads, create and participate in quick polls, and get access like, quick updates and news. With D groups, we don't just plan to have an internal committee of practice. We hope that in time we can grow an external committee of practice, right? And use this platform to provide the space where climate scientists within CGIAR and beyond can meet, engage, and collaborate. So the question is, why D groups, right? So our committee of practice is about 600 people strong. And while everyone who has indicated interest in the committee of practice has work, that is climate related, based on our surveys, different scientists have particular areas of interest that they are more inclined to. So D groups will allow us as a community to break down those silos and exchange ideas. Within D groups, we'll also have subgroups for targeted discussions. We sent out a survey not too long ago to ask the committee of practice members the kind of subgroups and conversations that they would like to see and join within D groups. While the response was a bit low, based on feedback, we have created two groups: adaptation and mitigation. And we're in the process of creating more. The survey link is in the chat box. Susie will be sharing that now, and we'll be sending it out again. So just let us know what other subgroups, the kind of conversations you'd like to have within D groups. This will help us shape, how we move forward with D groups. I would like to reiterate once again that D groups is very simple to use. It is email-based and requires no technical knowledge. You can manage how the information comes to you. You can set your emails to track conversations within D groups, and it can deliver to you daily or weekly, just depending on your appetite at that particular time for those conversations. You can also choose to go within the platform to discuss more and engage more on those particular conversations. So within the groups, we can share tools and resources, quickly share our research with scientists outside and within CGIAR, and generate quick engagement and conversations around it. We'll be able to view upcoming events and connect with other attendees ahead of time, communicate more frequently, more frequently in our bi-monthly newsletter. So we have the opportunity of a two-way exchange. We want to hear from you. This is a critical space for critical reflection and thematic discussions. In the next few days after this call, you get an email that invites you to D groups. Please log in and create a profile. We'll share this presentation and even more comprehensive information on the next steps on how to log in and manage your D groups account. So still speaking on collaboration, I will just quickly touch on our SharePoint site. Yes. So as a platform, we are continuously working, right, to convene CGIAR's climate scientists and synthesize, climate research to enhance the capacity of CGIAR and also amplify external visibility, right? And so our SharePoint site, which is internal, is another tool that helps us communicate the work that we do. The site has pages where you can find information about our upcoming events. We can see, the one for the COP launched here. We have, our latest publications. For example, you get access to climate sites. We are hoping to have a couple of evidence explainers there. We have the one that happened for the breakthrough report that is already there. We are also looking to highlight and amplify, CGIAR climate scientist publications here also. We also upload information about the CGIAR scientists, climate scientists on this site. So if you're looking for those that work within the climate space within CGIAR, you can find it here. We've been working on uploading it, and as time goes by, we'll keep uploading it. We're in the process of rounding up the SharePoint site. So again, Susie will share the link to the SharePoint site. And in time, we're going to link our SharePoint site to our external website, which will also provide more room for resources and opportunity, to again amplify and connect CGIAR science with an external audience. If you have any questions about the groups or SharePoint, please, put that in the chat box. Susie, we share the link to a SharePoint site. We're happy to receive your feedback on, how we can improve and continue to share information with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Thanks so much. So we have all these, you will receive further information on how to collaborate and all of these. We also, as I said, we have a search engine that's right now internally located in many of our functions, such as our innovative finance and resource mobilization group, use that database on a regular basis to know who to contact for writing proposals, for example, GCF proposals. So with that, I think we have around 13 minutes of time left. May I invite Lorraine to do a quick round of Q&A moderation. Then we have Guillaume, who is our Deputy Executive Managing Director. He would offer some closing remarks. But over to you, Lorraine, for the Q&A.
Okay, so I will moderate the Q&A because some of these questions may well be for Aditi. So I have a couple of questions that we're gleaning off of the Q&A and off the chat, but also do feel free to raise your hand, and hopefully if I don't see it, somebody will help me to see that a hand is raised. So the first question goes to Stefan, our panelist from the World Bank. The question is about how agriculture has maybe different trade-offs than the other sectors you mentioned that are covered in the CCDRs. The fact that the usual trade-off that we struggle with is sort of food security versus emissions, or that's different than a trade-off in, like the auto industry, petrol industry versus, climate emissions. And so the trade-offs in agriculture are different. So how do you see that weighing into the way that these things are analyzed? I'm then going to turn to Aditi for a question on whether we can document, whether the community of practice will have any role in documenting a country, crop-specific case stories, etc. But let's start with Stefan on that trade-off question. Stefan, we don't hear you. Have you been forced
Okay.
to
No, I have to have the organizers letting me unmute. So thank you very much. No, I think this is a very excellent question. One note is when you talk to people in different sectors, their trade-offs are always, the most important, right? And I like your comparison with cars, because when I talk with our colleagues in transport, I mean, mobility and access to jobs and access to services and so on is also like very central to people's life. But of course, agriculture has these two characteristics, right? One is food security, which is really the first of all of the needs, and the fact that most poor people are making a living from agriculture. So the distributional impacts are particularly important. And this is why our CCDRs are not, I like not to call them climate reports, but development reports, because we're not trying to put the climate objectives on top of other objectives. We have all of those objectives together. We want good development. That includes climate, but it's not the only thing. And for this community of practice, I think this is something really important to keep in mind, that this is a climate change community of practice. It doesn't mean that it has to put the climate change objectives higher than all of the other very relevant and important objectives that people and countries have. And that includes food security, that includes a good living wage for agricultural laborer. I mean, there are a lot of those objectives, and only if we manage them all together, we can propose solutions that will get traction. And my point on the political economy is also going in that direction. Is if we arrive by saying this is a solution for climate change, we have lost our audience. We have to arrive by saying this is our solution for a better life, and that includes climate action.
Yeah.
No, I allowed to unmute. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So Aditi, yes, I want to add to the question. Thank you for that, Stefan. Maybe Aditi, you could answer a couple, since a couple of them are really directed to you. One is a short answer, can we document the country or crop specific success stories and lessons learned and, get them together basically. But the other longer answer probably is how can the work of scientists at the initiative and center level in turn support the platform, as well as, the platform supporting the center. So maybe you could take those two and then we'll move on.
Yeah, but I also wanted to add on to what Stefan said, actually, because see, I think earlier it was Bill who was saying that we are 20, 30 years behind the other sectors in terms of decarbonization, electric vehicles. I mean, electric vehicles are, or solar panels are what they are, not because investments have gone into them for 20, 30, 40 years from now. In the ag space, because we have not worked on the decarbonization bit, lots of our technologies actually have trade-offs. The question that Stefan was answering, there are trade-offs with productivity and livelihood impacts, and part of the reason is that we haven't looked well enough yet. We haven't invested enough. So what I'm saying, it is still possible to have partly some of those win-win technologies. It's just that we need to invest and do more work around those technologies. So, but with that, I wanted to then also take on the other questions. I think it's very important to remember that the platform does not produce primary research work. Platform's job, the climate platform, the way the CGIAR structures itself is, the platform actually job is to synthesize and provide the big picture. And the way that I think it's a perfect collaboration between the initiatives, individual centers, various centers may actually work on climate smart agriculture, or say on climate information services. And each of the centers may have a bit different approach to working on climate information services. So I think a role of the platform then is to look at the different methods and the metrics and to say, okay, somebody is doing it in this way, others are doing it in a bit different way. What can we learn from each other? So I think that is the platform, literally is a platform where people can come together and learn from each other. And we are all a part of it. All the 600 scientists who have signed up are a part of it. We have the ambition of also embracing those external to the CGIAR in this session. We have had speakers from the World Bank and from the other donors. And so I think that we would also want to incorporate some of those other communities of practice and learn from each other. So this is literally a learning platform. I hope that answers the question. And yes, we do hope to have success stories that kind of goes across, one particular crop or commodity and kind of draw some bigger lessons.
While you have the mic, Aditi, you made the point that it's not the climate platform's job to do primary research, etc. But there is a question in the chat about whether the platform has any specific plan to bring relevant teams together in its convening role to work on big proposals like GCF.
Yes, indeed. So the climate platform, there is something called the climate CIC, Climate Investment Committee, and at the CGIAR, which works on GCF proposals. And one of the things is bringing together. So when we are looking for who needs to lead or co-lead or write the proposal on what topic it is, very often, this morning we had a speaker from the IFRM, your Innovative Finance and Resource Mobilization team. And she was telling us how her first port of call is always the scientist database. So they look at the scientist database, they try to match the profile, they try to match the expertise. And once they have a short list of a few names, then they kind of again go to other internal processes such as the regional directors and the country conveners to see if those names that they have got is correct. Because I mean, we are such a huge organization with so many scientists. It's simply not possible for anybody to know everybody. So in some ways, the platform provides that entry point to identify. So yes, certainly. And Lorraine, you also know the convening role we played in terms of the breakthrough report. That was a similar initiative. We had to do a report and we had to then find out the best scientists from across the CGIAR centers to deliver it. So convening is an important part of what we do.
But just to return quickly to your point about the database of scientists, there is a question on the chat about saying the database to identify the other scientists is great. I mean, a huge step forward, actually, in my opinion, but the fields are not very detailed. They want to know, is there any plan to develop a more comprehensive classification system? Now, I know this actually dashboard, there's a separate team in the system office that works on it, but if you know the answer, could you maybe quickly provide it, and then we will turn to questions on capacity building, because there's a couple of them on that.
Right. No, that's a good question. Actually, we were very conscious about how busy people are. So our first initial survey was just, it literally takes 5 minutes, and maybe that's why over 600 of you signed up. So now that we have this result, we have plans to do a bit more of, so once we have that internal SharePoint, we would have people fill in. So we would open up an opportunity for people to fill in their areas of expertise a bit more in detail, so that we have a more granular information about the scientists. And also some similar initiative is being undertaken by the CGIAR People and Culture, who are also standardizing our expertise database. So we are also working with them closely to see how best to do it in ways that serves various purposes.
Okay, well, we still have a few minutes, so I'll just shoot off some other questions that people are putting in the chat. We spoke a little bit about internal and external, and our panel was a mix of internal and external colleagues of the community of practice. And so the question was, would there be a collaboration, internal, external collaboration on engagement tracking? Like, so from research, innovation to scaling, to see the contribution and the progress that the community of practice is having. Question.
Yeah. Yes, ideally, yes, but the exact tools of how to do it would require some more discussions of how do we exactly track and document those kind of collaborations. So yes, in principle, the answer is yes. We would love to collaborate with other communities of practice and have these cross-fertilization of ideas. But then how do we track who influenced whom, etc.? I think and given that climate change is just such a huge, wicked problem, I think we are all here contributing to parts of it. So yeah, a short answer, yes.
Okay, yes. So do we have time for another question? Because I know that we have Guillaume Grosso waiting to share concluding remarks.
Yeah, I'm afraid we don't, because we are kind of very, very near the deadline. But what I can do and what we will do for the morning session as well, any question that remain unanswered, we would reach out to you individually, email you, and answer those questions. So in case you have not put in your name in the chat and you are somehow joined as that participant one, the generic link, please reach out with your question. So with that, thank you so much, Lorraine, for doing this. And I want to now invite Guillaume, who is our Deputy Executive Managing Director, to offer some closing remarks. Over to you, Guillaume.
Thank you very much, Aditi. Hi, everyone. So nice to see so many people connected. I didn't count all of them, but I see a lot of names on my screen, and I know it's the second session. I wasn't there this morning. This is really, really exciting. So thank you very much to everybody who contributed and everybody who connected. It's really a pleasure for me, frankly, to witness the coming together of all the climate scientists community, our external partners for this launch event. Of course, it's an internal launch event, but it tells the story of who we are at CGIAR. And I cannot help but think about even what's written as our mission statement, which is to deliver science and innovation that advance the transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. So really, climate is embedded, is central to our mission. It's, as you know, is one of the 5 impact areas for CGIAR. And to me personally, I have to say, as a newcomer, I can say it's one of the reasons I was really excited to join CGIAR, because this is really the place where we can bring together food security, nutrition, biodiversity, and climate. And I don't know of many places that can bring together all these things and make it work and generate so many ideas. I think 600 people identified within CGIAR as working on climate when there was the survey on self-identification. 600 people, that's amazing. I think it's the largest that I know of. Well, let me be prudent. It's one of the largest scientific communities working on climate that I know of. And that's just the CG crowd. And then we can see today there's a lot of externals coming in Really, thank you for your very inspiring contributions. I caught on Germany and the World Bank and others. I think it shows that it's not a CGIAR show at all. You know, so 600 people is only a bit, maybe the tip of the iceberg of something much bigger that takes all our partners, our donors, and it's really exciting to be able to thread the needle and connect this community together. So look, it would have been, you know, relevant anytime, right? Last year, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, because climate is so important. But I think it's even more relevant now, because not only because, you know, you just need to switch on the television or hear the news to know how important and how prominent the nexus with climate is becoming, but also because within CGIAR internally, we're now moving with the mega programs. And that means, you know, stepping back and having that chance now to say, how do we think about what we're going to do for the next 5 years and for the future, frankly, and make sure climate is embedded, because I think it should really be central to our thinking. So I'm not going to be very long. It's already very late for some of you, depending where you are on the planet. This launch is essentially internal facing, although we had a lot of great input from external players and partners. But I think what it tells me is that it's a kickoff, and a kickoff of a very long story. And I think I'm really excited to imagine the kind of things that we can build together, the kind of exciting events we can bring together, the kind of exciting thinking and frankly breakthrough innovation and science to solve some of the most important problems that our planet has to face now. So really, thank you for your commitment. Thank you for being so many, and really looking forward to contributing to those discussions and witnessing the growth of the community. Back to you, Aditi.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. Indeed, 600. And I actually suspect that there are many more who haven't yet taken the survey. So if you have not, the survey link is in the chat. So please reach out. Chances are we are even a bigger community than the 600 out there. So thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. We are 3 minutes over, but we have a fantastic discussion. We would follow through. All of you would receive a recording of this discussion, and we would follow up with all the suggestions that have come in, and we will be in touch through the various activities that we do, through our climate insights, through the newsletters, through our webinars and podcasts, and more importantly, through some of the evidence synthesis work that we are planning to move ahead with. And we would be in touch with our scientists in asking for volunteers to help us with some of that evidence synthesis that will certainly feed into the next round of our mega program. So thank you, everyone, and we will be in touch. So expect to hear more from us and our team. Thank you.